I would like to read to you today probably one of the most difficult passages in the Bible, and it's from Romans 13. And the man who wrote it under the direction of the Spirit of God happened to die a death under the emperor of Rome at the time, Nero. But listen to what he says as the spokesman of God. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and you will be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid. For rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. This is why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. All Christians do not live under civil government that is fair, or government that is not antagonistic to Christians. Some of our dear brothers and sisters have gone to the underground church, for to be publicly a Christian above ground is to face martyrdom. But here Paul is telling believers in the first century, Romans written in 50 AD, in that area of time, under Nero, a pagan, a man that burned Christians alive, even to light up his gardens when he had parties, dip them in tar and pitch and light them up to burn while they had their festivities. And yet he says, no matter what the government is, we as believers are to be people who submit. The problem is, what if government asks you to sin against God? What if government asks you, as the 3 Hebrew children, to bow unto an idol? Or even as Nero, burn incense to me or I'll kill you. Early Christians would not rebel. They simply would not submit to a law that went against the law of God. Even as Moses' parents were not willing to kill their firstborn son, they did not fear what the king had decreed because it went against God's law. So for us, there's God's law, civil law, and then the law of God in governing the church and governing our personal lives. But we are people who live in submission to governing authorities. Think of what we're facing now. At this time of the year, we're facing April 15th, time to pay taxes. Will you do that in submission, or will you cheat, or will you be dishonest, or even resentful? We've just went through a tumultuous presidential election in our country. And the candidates, many of us were facing an issue that neither one would have been our choices, or maybe they were, but we had to choose. Now will we submit to them as leaders? As a believer, we submit to all kinds of authority as long as we don't have to break the law of God. May God give you and I strength to work under any kind of government He is pleased to put us under. Let's consider Romans 13 later and see what He wants us to do.